So it is noon, high noon. Hi everyone, welcome to the Fearless Authenticity webcast. Today our topic is focused on authenticity and politics. I want to say a little bit about what this is not today. This is not us versus them. This is not who's going to win the election. This is not Republicans versus Democrats. What this is authenticity and politics, and what are the challenges that politicians have in terms of being authentic in the society that we have right now with all the unrest. And I probably don't need to say anymore, everyone here is pretty clear about what our environment is. So the doctors are in. I would like to introduce the Honorable Robert Scott. He is our guest today. We're not sure what has happened to our other two guests, but we're going to go ahead and move forward. So given that, I'm going to turn it over to our Doctors of Authenticity, Dr. Sherry Maloof and Dr. James Smith Jr. I would encourage all of you to interact with us in the question and answer, ask questions, make comments, and interact. Okay, take it away, guys.
Well, hi, Jim. How you doing?
James. Welcome back. Welcome back. Good to be here. And always good to work with you.
And you. Every 2 weeks. I kind of miss seeing you every week, but that's all right. Ditto. This still works. So we're going to talk about authenticity in politics. And actually, Robert is a doctor as well. I just wanted to add that in. So we've got the 3 doctors of authenticity in politics for today. And so I just wanted to start off by asking you, Robert, to tell us a little bit about how and why you got into politics. I know you've been in it for a long time, so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up there.
Well, it was kind of a natural extension of my work in the community, and it seemed to actually just build upon itself. They're starting out with someone saying, oh, you're very, very good with numbers. Do you want to be on the budget committee? And from there, it ended up in the school board and in the legislature, and it just kind of went on and on and on. And my role, it just like kind of expanded even onto all these different presidential campaigns and gubernatorial campaigns. And basically over the last 35, 40 years, meeting almost everybody that ran for president. I mean, during that period of time in New Hampshire, because we're first the nation primary there. So for me, it was just like a natural extension of being a public servant. So it's very much a servant leadership type of thing. I don't really see myself as a politician. I'm just kind of a leader in the community that helps other people.
Thanks, Robert. Hello, Derek.
Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, we had a little problem getting in on Zoom. The colleges and universities and high schools and every school you can think of is now using Zoom for communication. So it took me a little while to get in.
Well, welcome. I'm glad you made it in.
Absolutely.
And so the question that I just asked Robert is, just to start off. So what we're talking about today is authenticity in politics. And so we're not putting out any position, whether right or left or anything like that. It's not about positions in politics, but it's about how challenging is it to be yourself, to be authentic as a part of the political process. So the first question is how did you end up getting into politics? What was your journey there?
How much do we have? 3 hours? Or, no.
Do we have the annotated version? Oh no, he froze. Oh no. At least he's froze with a nice smile on his face. Oh, there he is. There you go.
I kind of equate election day with like football. And I remember probably watching either Carter Reagan or Reagan Mondale on election night, and all the different states coming in, and it kind of reminded me of kind of election day being like Super Bowl Sunday, and you do all you can and you put your team on the field, and the team that does a better job and sometimes gets a little lucky break will win versus another team. So that kind of really intrigued me. Plus, my parents have often been involved in a lot of civic affairs, not being elected, but a lot of different community service activities going back my entire life. And I've kind of continued that same type of civic engagement and public service. So I was listening to Robert talk about being a public servant. That's what you are. As an elected official, you are a public servant. So it's kind of been a continuation, a lot of the work that I've done in my, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. or 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. capacity, where you're really trying to help people. And I think because of that, I'm also a lawyer. So the idea of trying to help people solve complex problems and issues is something that's always something I've gravitated to. I think my parents kind of instilled that in me, as well as from my grandfather, who's someone on my dad's side I never got a chance to meet. But he was an entrepreneur, was able to purchase our family farm in 1945 outside of Greenville, North Carolina, and kind of work with other farmers to help provide better education opportunities for their children. So that whole collective of helping the public is something that I have always been interested in, but it is a challenge because you're a public servant. You could be, as an elected official, and it could be something that's very small to much larger, regarding some type of a major.
Derek, I'm gonna kind of jump in because you're breaking up a lot
in your district or your city.
Derek, I'm going to interrupt you. You're kind of breaking up a lot.
So it's something that's a 24 job, but it's also very worthwhile because you'll come in contact with someone that will.
All right, Derek, I don't know if you can see me. I don't know if everything's frozen for you. Oh, we lost him. All right, he'll get back in. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
So welcome to Fearless Authenticity, and our subject today is authenticity in politics. It's not about one side or another, so we're not promoting, any particular agenda today. Today is about what has your experience been in trying to be authentic and being your authentic self as a politician. So the first question is how did you get started into it? What was your journey to becoming involved?
So I'm going to answer in an unusual way, and you're going to have to follow me. You're going to have to try and follow me. My answer, I thought about this the last day or two, and I did a program that some of you might have heard of or might have participated in the past. There are these leadership programs at the county level, Leadership Montgomery, Leadership Prince George's, then there's Leadership Greater Washington, there's Leadership Maryland, and I participated in Leadership Greater Washington I was the class of 2018, and one of the requirements for each of the participants, I assume they do this every year, is that you have to get up and talk about yourself for 2 minutes. And, you know, just, and you can focus on any aspect of your life, whether it's your career, your family, you know, your background of why you got into whatever, you know, you do in life. And most people did a little bit of all of that. And my first career was in journalism, so I was worried that I would ramble too much. And they emphasize that you should try to speak off the cuff, but you know, if you were nervous, you could read from notes or present it like a speech. And then somebody who went ahead of me, you know, you drew a number which told you what order you were going to go in, and it, you know, it's a 9 or 10 month program, so you know, some people went maybe not the very first meeting, but the second, you know, monthly meeting, and 5 or 6 people would go each month. So you might be way down the line. Anyway, somebody who went ahead of me did hers as kind of like a slam poem. And I just thought it was really cool. So I decided to write this little poem about my life, and it totally focuses on how I got into politics and public service. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read it. I memorized it at one time, but it's long, and that was, you know, 2 years ago. So it's dedicated to my mother, whose name is Irene, and my good friend and mentor in politics, Delegate Pena Melnick. Jocelyn represents District 21 along with me. And so here it is. Animal lover, tree hugger, fast talker, dog walker, cautious skier, avid reader, worried climate change believer. Wife of Dale, mom of Allison, Caroline, Ryan, and Rory. My name is Mary Lehman, and this is my story. Born April 8th, 1964, the fourth of 6 kids to Richard T. and Irene B. in Prince George's County, AKA PG. There were no helicopter parents back then. We roamed all around Greenbelt. It was the 70s. Everything was zen. I attended Catholic high school, 1st grade to 8th. My world was nurturing and felt very safe. But my mother, she refused to conform, a native New Yorker oblivious to small town scorn. She always had a cause du jour, fighting prejudice, sprawl development, the Vietnam War. Irene, can't you stay home? My dad would say. No, Richard, then the kids would think the world was okay. Like in Paul Simon's little town, we grew up believing that God keeps his eye on us all, and he used to lean upon us as we pledged allegiance to the wall. While we were reciting, Mom was fighting, espousing fair housing, integration, and busing, while most white neighbors were fuming and fussing. I attended public high school, tried hard to fit in, finally found my voice in journalism as a UMD terrapin. I was a writer for 10 years, honed my skills on the Hill. Reporting for Congress daily was the ultimate thrill. Then my life took a turn when Redskins owner Jack Kent Cooke arrived in Laurel to take a look. A 78,600 seat stadium was his aim, but opponents, including me, beat him at his own game. We were an all-volunteer army with a part-time lawyer for hire. The fight took 2 years. My mom called it baptism by fire. The epic zoning battle changed the course of my life. I transitioned from stay-home mom and wife. Now, seeking office was never my plan, but a state delegate named Jocelyn entered the scene. She hired me, taught me all she knew, and before it was through, I decided to run for an open county council seat in District 1. There's a circle of life. I'm one of 5 sisters and a brother, but it was I who followed in the footsteps of my mother. 2 wise women, Irene and Jocelyn, saw something I couldn't see, that public service was written in my stars, something clearly meant to be. That's my story.
I like it.
Wow.
Very nicely done. There you go.
Thank you, thank you. This is for all of you, because I'm sure you have amazing stories as well. But
And you used to have that committed to memory?
Is true. My mother still talks about, and she doesn't know why. She said, I don't know if it was my own instinct, but she said, of the 6 kids, I took you more often to protests and marches. And my earliest memory with my mother was when I was 5 years old. She took me to New York City for a massive demonstration in support of passage of the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. And I think it was on International Women's Day in March. And she, you know, to this day says, I always remember, like, it seemed like half the time that we were there, you had to go to the bathroom. Like, you kept saying, Mom, isn't there a bathroom around here? And I've asked her, like, well, why did you take me? I was only 5, because I had older siblings and younger siblings. And she said, I don't know. I just, you seem to enjoy those kinds of things. So that's my story.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
And used to have that committed to memory. Wow. 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 I have a question for you, and whoever wants to jump in and answer it, feel free. I know as a speaker and trainer and educator, I'm not what I used to be. I have evolved, especially as it relates to authenticity. I'm curious for you as a politician, how have you evolved from an authenticity standpoint, considering where you were and where you are now and where we are as a society? How have you evolved?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm still evolving. Like I think we most of us are in if not all aspects of our lives, a lot of aspects of our lives. So I should say that before I got into politics, while I was still a journalist, I was very active in my community. I'm a former head of my civic association, and I was involved in a number of other causes as a volunteer. And in that capacity, I was a lot freer to be, I don't want to say more candid, but because I'm a pretty candid person, most people would say about me, and it is, both it can be a good thing, and people will praise me for it, but it can also be detrimental sometimes. I'm kind of a what you see is what you get. I'm a pretty straight shooter, but definitely in politics, you have to be measured at times. You can't always say exactly what you think, or you have to, stop and think, how can I word this so that I make my point, that I'm, effective without being offensive. One time after a hearing in Upper Marlboro, where I was, really kind of grilling someone, and whatever the answer they gave, I wasn't satisfied with. And I kind of said, oh, come on, like that can't be. And the person looked kind of taken aback. And I asked one of my colleagues later, I said, was I too hard on that person? And she said to me, I don't think so. I think they're probably used to it, but I would just keep in mind, I try to tell myself that sometimes it's not so much what you say, your actual words, it's how you say it. And I have a sort of tendency to be pretty intense, and even when I don't necessarily mean to be. Like I tend to, I don't smile naturally when I ask people questions, and I'm very, I kind of like hone in on things, and sometimes that is intimidating to people. And when I don't really even mean to be, I'm just trying to get information, and I forget that. So that's something that I have to try to remind myself of, and I do. And so I definitely talk differently as an elected official. I'm still the same person, but speak differently, choose my words, maybe more carefully, try to be aware of my tone more than I did in my activist role.
Thank you. Thank you. Robert, Derek, how have you evolved authentically over the years?
Well, I'll agree with Mary. We're, as individuals, both as elected officials and just being human beings, we're always evolving. But I guess from an authenticity perspective, I've always been an active listener. I think I listen more, and authentic from the perspective that, when you first get elected, you want to demonstrate to your voters and the citizens that elected you that you have the answer, because that's why you asked them to vote for you, asked for their vote. And you may have certain experience and backgrounds that may give you some information and some answers, but you don't have all the answers. And I think for new elected officials, there's a desire to please every constituency, every individual, have all the answers. And as you become more, as my dad will say, seasoned in the position, you realize you don't have all the answers, and you can be authentic by saying, I don't have the answer to this issue, but I'm going to listen to your issues, your concerns, your perspectives. I'm going to gather as much information as possible and try to make the right decision at this time with the information I have that's available. And that does take some authenticity to be able to be comfortable to say that to your constituents. Sometimes even the media, that you don't have all the answers, but that you're going to used your best judgment, your experiences, the information you gathered to be able to make the best decision that you can. But that's not always easy to say, especially when someone's newly elected, because people are coming to you because you're supposed to have the answers. And to be authentic and say, no, this is something that we're dealing with COVID-19. I don't think anyone on this Zoom call was around during 1918 during the Spanish flu. If you were, you have got really, really good genes. But you don't have all the answers. So, and that will often happen as an elected official. There's always going to be some new scenario every year in a budget process, budget cycle that's unique and novel. And being able to say, okay, this is my solution for it possibly, but I need time to gather that. So that's part of that authenticity.
If I could just follow up on that, Derek, that was an excellent answer. I think people really appreciate that if you can, admit, like, no, I don't know. No, I've never even been asked that before, but I'll find out. But I would say by the same token, something I did, and I wish I could say I practiced it or I was aware of it, but again, it's kind of my personality. I ask a lot of questions. But also as an elected official, you can't be afraid to ask questions of other so-called, experts, whether those people are, private sector people, other government officials, agency heads, and I've always told that to, groups of students that I talk to for career day, scouts, like there is really no dumb question. And it's like that old adage about when you're back in school and you think, oh, should I ask this? Well, I might sound dumb. Odds are, if you have that question, other people have the question too. And I have been thanked so many times by either colleagues or people sitting in an audience for asking the questions I do like, and they would say, I was wondering the same thing. And I'm so glad you said that. And what I say to myself is, that being an elected official is such a privilege that I'm going to ask the questions I think my constituents would ask if they were sitting in this chair. And people really appreciate that.
Yeah, good. And Robert, what about you?
So I've been a steward of the public trust for 35, almost 40 years, a very long list of accomplishments. My good works precede me everywhere I go now. I don't have to talk a lot. I just have to listen a lot. In many situations, just my mere presence there has an influence on what's going to go on. Usually the largest oxygen molecule in the room. So for me, it's a matter of listening. People look to me to solutions. I have governor call me up on the phone and ask me a question because he knows he's going to get an honest answer. So for me, I really, decades of hard work, coalitions, relationships, has put a place for me where I'm very careful the words I choose. I'm an elder, people respect me. I try to really stay above the fray. I think we're in a very dysfunctional period of time. We're looking for people who definitely are solution builders, people who bring people together. And I do that well, to be honest with you. So in terms of my evolution, I'm very careful how I don't add to the disruption of today. I have definite opinions on the direction where the country's going. I don't like it, I'll be honest with you. And for myself, I voice them moderately because almost like back to the 60s, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And that's not me.
So it sounds like there's some challenge just in how you put yourself out there because people will react. There's a lot of sensitivities right now to all kinds of things, and it's very, very divisive. So how do you maintain who you are in that divisiveness when a single word can get you into, deep trouble? The media will grab it, whatever. People will attack you on social media. It's just, when you're a public figure and you're out there in the open, you've got like a bullseye on you. So how hard is it to be who you are, knowing that, you're so publicly out there?
People,
Good, Robert.
People actually, I think the challenge that you have, people have, you typecast, very much stereotyped. I'm a conservative Republican, a religious conservative Republican. I have people on the left who immediately ascribe all of these negative qualities to me. And yet they know nothing about me at all, to be quite honest with you. So I let people make their own description of what they want, and I let my words and I let my actions do all the speaking for me. I'm careful not to respond when I have somebody attack me, and I let myself be directed by my own good common sense all the time. I mean, I don't see, again, I don't contribute to the disruption. I mean, that's my job. My job is not to contribute to the disruption. And out of that, I have a wide coalition of people from bold perspectives that respect me. I mean, so it's a very fine line to walk.
Well, I hope you don't mind, Robert, if I refer to the incident that you described to me the other day, where somebody called you an idiot.
That's a good story. So we'll tell that story. So I was at very interesting. We have up in New Hampshire, we don't have a lot of New Year's evening parties. We have a lot of New Year's Day parties as you go to different people's houses and these people gather. Once a year for the last, 32 years, we go to a friend's house. She has about 80 to 100 people come. And they're liberal Democrats, very good friends for years, and kind of leaving the party, the owner, the host kind of razzes me a little and says, I've met the president and I know the president and everything. Oh my God, you're such a big Trump supporter. And some guest at the party says, oh my God, you must be an idiot, the person said. And I say nothing because I know what's exactly going to happen when I leave the room. I leave, we went home. And the host turned around and said, this man's written 18 books. I mean, this guy's done business in like dozens of countries, and I don't need to prove anything to anybody. So for myself, it's a matter of, again, back what I said before, I don't contribute to the problem. I contribute to the solution. And I wish more people thought the way I thought.
And just to follow up on that, I think, when you look at the concept of fearless authenticity and then Robert being comfortable in your skin, and I think that's something that elected officials have to do. You have to be comfortable in who you are, your background, and your positions. I believe in the marketplace of ideas. I don't want to take a shot at Mary, who went to University of Maryland, but there's a little more elite university in Charlottesville called the University of Virginia. No, I'm just joking. But the whole concept of marketplace and ideas, and I can relate to Robert, I have a very, very broad group of contacts and friends and constituencies. I have a good friend from law school who is very conservative. And we get together, well, because of COVID, we can't get together as often, but we talk about how we are so much more similar than different on various issues. And so I really, truly believe in the marketplace of ideas. And so when people come to lobby me about different issues and concerns, I often play the devil's advocate. As they're giving their position, I often take the other position, even if I know where I may be leaning to, because I want to hear the other side of the perspective and they get that response. So I really try to think through various issues. But when you are an elected official, you do have a spotlight. So I get a lot of different messages on social media. I do a lot of social media. And, some people try to block people on social media. I don't do that. I want to hear all the issues. I believe that, if you're an emperor and you have no clothes, then you're going to have a problem. So I try to get as much constructive criticism as possible. I know no one's going to be more harder on me than me. And so getting all that information is helpful, and that helps you to be authentic, because when you do make a decision, you made a decision that in your mind is the right one based on all the information you received, and you're comfortable with it, and you can be authentic in your perspective.
Yeah, nice. What about you, Mary?
So I would just say briefly, I'm liberal progressive and living in a overwhelmingly majority Democratic district. And I don't get very many people mischaracterizing me to my face, but I do, like a lot of people, I think people through social media are much more aggressive and confrontational than they, were just not too many years ago. I also think that people on email are more likely to be angry or nasty than they would be if you talk to them face to face or even over the phone. So I do fairly frequently get people, sometimes they're my own constituents, sometimes they're people from other parts of Maryland or even out of state, that will send me these very angry emails. I try to keep in mind, because it's often the case that these are sort of mass emails that are cut and pasted, and just, people are told, if you're interested in this issue or that issue, whatever it might be, it could be the environment, it could be police reform, contact every elected official, and there are people that either aren't that politically aware about the difference between the different levels of government. I mean, even as a county council member, I got called Congresswoman Lehman on more than one occasion. It's a little bit sad, but it's kind of astonishing the degree to which, and I am stereotyping somewhat, that people are ignorant about government and the difference between, city council, county council, state legislature, and Congress. But just a couple of weeks ago, I got someone who sent me, it was obviously part of a mass email campaign saying, Dear Delegate Lehman, I'm so disappointed that you haven't been more outspoken about police reform. And, you had an opportunity to chime in on such and such a case. And it was a case in another state. It was, you could have done something to help with this situation. And I read it and I was like, immediately thought, this person is confused. They don't realize I'm a state legislator in, Maryland, and I wouldn't even have had an opportunity to probably know about that case, never mind take a vote on it. And I have been outspoken. If you look at, my Twitter account, I don't do a lot of social media. I'm not even on Facebook, but I do Twitter, mostly for technology reasons. I view it as really simple and I understand how it works. But anyway, I do support police reforms. I've only in my career gotten 2 small donations from the Fraternal Order of Police, and I've returned them because I don't want someone trying to come to me saying, oh, you owe us something, or you can't, vote for reforms that, overhaul the law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights. So I just very calmly said this to this person. I used the opportunity to educate her and say, you're mistaken. I am a state level official. I am not even familiar with that case. I would not have been able to take a vote on a case in wherever it was. I think it was Georgia. You must be referencing maybe you're thinking I'm a member of Congress. And in fact, if you have an issue with my stance on police reform, check out my Twitter account. And here's what we're doing in Maryland. We have a work group that's looking at police reform. It's headed by Delegate so-and-so. They've had this many hearings, and I hope you'll follow those hearings, and that process will continue to unfold. She never responded to me. Sometimes people will respond and say, oh, well, thank you for that information. I never heard anything back, but I try to approach it from an educational standpoint. And I just remind myself, and anybody in politics knows this, politics is not for the faint of heart. If you are thin-skinned in this business, you be crying all the time. So it is hard. It definitely is hard. You cannot take stuff personally, or you wouldn't get anything done, and you really would be down all the time.
I say one thing about Derek for a minute. So what Derek says, I have to absolutely agree with him. I am interested in the marketplace of ideas. So when I meet somebody, we're going to have a conversation about the merits of a very specific issue there. I approach it very objectively. If Derek presents some excellent points, what do you call it? I don't think of them as red points or blue points. They're just good points, to be honest with you. There's no labeling, there's no naming, there's no shaming. And if his merits of his debate are better than mine, I'm very open to accepting his position. Because, and I think that's the problem with so many people I see who aren't authentic in politics. They're ideologues, they're on the extreme, and they're very rigid. This business is one about being a good thinker and being able to come up with solutions. And the tide that floats the boat higher, that's the boat I want to be in.
Wow, wow, wow. Let's stay with thinking. A lot of you have said, what I'm gathering, you think to talk rather than talking to think. How challenging is that? And are you the same way in your personal life? Seems like a lot of work. What's to take that on?
Again,
I'll
I'll do it. But besides doing this, I'm also an Orthodox clergyman. I am a role model in my persona every day. I mean, I have people who look to my advice all the time. The personal life is really not that important. But my responsibilities are many at this point in my life, my children, my family, the community. So for myself, I'm very conscious of, in a very transcendent way, of what I'm doing all the time. Every word counts, every thought, every action. And it's really not a lot of work, Jim, because at the next breath, it becomes your lifestyle. And it's just the way you really think. And as Derek said so well, and I kind of connect with him already, what do you call it? It's the skin that you wear.
Any thoughts, Mary or Derek?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on what the question is. Can you, reframe it or?
I've heard a lot so far on the panel that a lot of thought goes into what comes out of your mouth. So you're thinking to talk rather than talking to think. How challenging is that? And does it spill over into your personal life where you are now at ease? You don't have to edit what you're going to say, or as Robert said, this is who he is.
Derek, I'm going to let you go first.
I think
Anything to
Derek
say?
is frozen.
I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Oh, here he comes back again.
Is he?
I don't know if he's having technical issues.
Yeah.
I'll try to answer that, James. So I come from a family that's really sort of political, and I would say, and my kids are interested in politics. My mother was a community activist. So I'm probably a little sort of, freer, I feel, in private. But in terms of not making assumptions, as Robert talked about, when I, meet someone and I know something about them, I've never met them before, but say they're, a successful business owner, not jumping to conclusions about what that might mean, like whether this person is conservative, obviously a Republican. And I think Derek was right when he said we have, it's something we all need to remind ourselves of. We I think have a lot more in common than we have differences. And I think we can't be afraid to talk about either one. And, back to my colleague, Councilwoman Harrison's point, she's now a delegate with me in Annapolis. It's not always what you say, although that's important. It often is the way you say it. So whether you have maybe something in your mind that would be characterized as a preconceived notion, instead of saying something as a statement, if you're curious, for example, about someone's politics and you feel like it's, a safe topic, instead of making some assumption, you find out through questions, what do you do for a living? Where are you from? What, when you get around either directly or indirectly, so how do you feel about such and such, whatever it might be that's in the news, whether it's climate change or, race relations or something like that. And you also, and I have to remind myself of this too, because I come from a family of talkers, you learn a lot more by listening than you do by talking, especially if what you're trying to find out from somebody else is, is about them. You know, ask enough to draw them out, and then you listen.
Thank you.
Derek, did you hear the question that James had posed?
Yeah, I heard a little bit of it. I'm dealing with all kinds of technology issues, so I brought my mobile hotspot into the room. So I may have to turn this on if need be. That's what happens when you have pods all over the place and 5 different Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Google Meeting platforms going on. So yeah, I guess from my perspective is that you can't assume a person is just based on what you think they may be. Just because a person says that they are a very conservative or very progressive or liberal individual in policy. You know, we have a broad range of perspectives, and on certain issues, you may have a certain viewpoint, but you may have other perspectives as well. I have a son on the autism spectrum, and I have people from a lot of different backgrounds that are supportive of the issue of autism. And we may differ on various issues. And just like in your own families, you have people that have the same mother or father. And, you know, Mary talked about having a number of siblings, and you have different dynamics within your own family. You know, I say anytime you have 2 people together, you have politics. So that could be a husband, wife, mother, son, father, daughter, brother, sister, or colleagues in the legislative body. So I try not to make assumptions when I first meet someone, because, you know, life is very short, and you in most situations, you can always learn from someone regardless of someone's background. And so that's why I really believe in this concept of the marketplace of ideas, because you can gather information from anyone if you're open to it.
So we teach a program called Positive Power and Influence. And what Positive Power and Influence does is it teaches people how to manage their impact on other people. So it teaches you, you know, tone of voice, body language, the words that you choose, kind of the stuff that you were talking about, Mary, you know, that it's how you say it. And one of the influence styles is called attracting. And part of attracting, there's a behavior in it called finding common ground. Now, finding common ground would change this country tremendously, tremendously. It seems to be in the investment on a lot of people's parts, for whatever reason, to continue the divisiveness that's here. And, you know, Robert was saying, I got to be part of the solution. So when you think about common ground, is this something that you think about? And what does that mean to you from an authentic place? Can you really create that common ground with the people around you?
It's harder today to do it than it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. It's very difficult now. I think the media has done a very effective job of polarizing people and really placing people into really divided camps. And instead of really focusing on the common things that unite us and bring us together, we're constantly being shown the things that make us different, to be honest with you. And this is a huge problem. I see that the trending and the challenges, as you know, psychologically, when you have just so many different images being brought into your mind, that becomes your mindset eventually. And unless you have a great level of self-awareness, which a lot of people don't have, unfortunately, you really become very rigid. I mean, so let's just say I was to meet Mary and I have that mindset. I have an immediate stereotype of what I expect of her. Am I going to engage her? Am I going to talk with her? Am I going to ignore her? I mean, and immediately that just cuts off a complete universe of me of ideas and ways of improving myself. But my perspective is of the minority now, unfortunately. I mean, most people, they want to safely put you in some kind of a little box. And unfortunately, what that's done is it's created a way that we no longer are able to talk to each other anymore. And because we can't, and then our leaders will go back to even the situation with the second stimulus bill now, both sides have acted like they were about 5 years old, in my opinion, because no one really understands the greater good that's going to be achieved by coming forward with something while people are suffering and they're unemployed. I mean, and the whole idea of the greater good is something that's lost. I mean, you know, things have become much more transactional versus relational. And because of that, you know, I talk about all the time, it's funny, even the most liberal senators in the State House, they may not agree with my positions, but they respect me personally, because I have a very morally focused leadership all the time. And that greater good piece is always in the middle of it. And we need to get back to that. I mean, a final, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan would sit on the Truman balcony and have a martini after a contentious session. And that's gone. I mean, and that level of civility is absolutely gone. I mean, and I go back to that civility really disappearing when someone called President Obama a liar while he was actually speaking in the Capitol there. People in public service need to be the leaders of that level of civility, and maybe I'm just a little old-fashioned, but I think we are role models, and I think it's up to us.
Yeah, just to follow up on Robert's comment, I mean, I definitely think we've gone from a perspective of relationship building to transactions. And I think that's what's because such an issue. Because when you're in a relationship building perspective and you know someone, you know their policy, but you also know their family and their background and where they came from, and they grew up on a farm, and your grandfather grew up on a farm, or they grew up in the South, or you grew up in the North, you went to college at a rival school. When you develop those kind of pieces of a relationship, it makes it harder to have that type of anger and animosity. It reminds me, like, when I've had issues with constituents and a constituent is screaming at you and you're listening, but you're not feeding into that and you're just listening. It's really hard to scream back at someone who's not screaming back at you. And so we've lost that relationship perspective, and it's all become a transaction. So when you're doing a transaction, like when you go to buy a good or service, you may not meet that person again. And so you're just thinking about, I've got to get what I can get right now. But when you have a relationship with someone, you know you're going to come in contact with this person over and over and over again. So it's about this specific situation, but it's also about the relationship as a whole. And I think we've lost that. And when you're focusing on a relationship, you're focusing more on the commonalities that you have and not just about a transaction. And I think that's happened, especially in the political space, and I would say even more so at the legislative arena, at the federal, state, and local, where you had members of Congress that lived in DC and then went home when they could. And so because you were there, you got to know people. But now even doing that is frowned upon. So you don't spend any time like you may have done in the past with someone of a different perspective. And so we've lost those bonds of relationship, and we can't focus on the commonalities that we all have, and we just focus on what do I get out of this right now, which is a transactional perspective.
That's good. What do you love about what you do, and what do you loathe about what you do?
Hold on a second, James. Mary didn't get a chance to say something about the common ground.
No, I really don't have much to add. Again, I serve in a legislature that has a supermajority of Democrats in both chambers, veto-proof majorities. So I don't necessarily have to work across the aisle, but I try to. And I've already been thinking about a bill that I did last year that made it in the House, but was never voted on in the Senate because of COVID. We ended our 90-day session 19 days early, which is significant when you think how short 90 days is to end almost 3 weeks early. A lot of bills got stuck, but it was a really good dog bill requiring adequate shelter for dogs in extreme weather, heat and cold and storms. And some of our counties have those laws, but we don't have a statewide law. And it's a good bill. And you know, I worked with a number of Republicans on the committee I sit on, which is where the bill came to the Environment and Transportation Committee. And several of them said, you know, I'm really grateful that you reached out. I did have some questions about this bill. And a lot of times Democrats don't even talk to us. But, you know, I wanted it to pass. And I figured there would be concerns because dogs are often used in rural areas as, you know, as working animals to, you know, herd sheep or, you know, whatever else they do to, you know, accompany someone duck hunting. And so I knew there were bound to be questions and I didn't want the bill to be derailed. But a colleague of mine from Baltimore City that had a really sort of liberal progressive housing bill, you know, modeled this in a way that was really impressive. And when the bill, it's called source of income. So it says that landlords cannot ask renters where their income comes from. And it's a way of discouraging discrimination against people who have Section 8 housing vouchers. And this has been around for years, for 25 years. And Delegate Lehman went to all the Republicans on the committee and a few of them voted for it. One in particular that's pretty conservative, and like the chairman literally like was slack-jawed and said, you know, Delegate so-and-so, and he said, well, she came and asked for my vote, and people don't often do that. That was his reason. He said she came and she asked me for my vote, and no one ever had before on that particular issue. Wow, you know, I mean, that's so powerful, and it seems so, you know, sort of sense. And as Robert said, that was, you know, it may sound old fashioned now, but that used to be the norm. And I think it would behoove like everybody all across the political spectrum to remember that and get back to that. Doesn't mean you're going to win everyone over, but to at least have the conversation. It's like somebody said to me years ago when I was fundraising for you know, breast cancer. I told someone I was afraid to ask this other person. I didn't know them that well. And she said, you've got to ask. You got to give someone an opportunity to say yes or no. If you don't even ask, you're not even giving them the chance. Like you're denying them the chance. And I said, wow, I'm going to have to remember that.
Sorry, James. Now, what was your question? It sounded like a good one.
I was just going to ask, considering they do a lot of heavy lifting in their roles, what do you love and what do you loathe about what you do?
Repeat I'm sorry, you were breaking up. What was the last part?
What do you love and what do you loathe about your role as an elected official? Robert, your mic.
Back over here. So what I like very much is the bills I've had passed. I mean, so in New Hampshire, every child that goes to a charter school, I was the co-sponsor of that bill. Anytime someone drives up to an ATM and it tells you that they're going to rip you off for $3.50, that was my bill. I have a number of bills that have really improved the quality of people's lives. I mean, and that's ultimately what this profession's all about, is enhancing the quality of life. What I don't like being typecast. That comes with kind of the perspective there. But the positives far outweigh any negatives that come with the job. I love it to death, actually.
Wow. Derek, how about you? Love and loathe?
I love just being able to help people. I think that's what most people who come into this job really trying to be a public servant, at least that's what they should. I think some people do get into this profession for the wrong reasons, for power, prestige, or other things. But really, if you truly want to be an elected official, your focus should be public servant and being a public servant. And so that's what I like. When you get an email or a call or a follow-up on someone that you did something that was very small to you, it was just a matter of picking up the phone or sending an email, and then later finding out how that really helped someone in such an immeasurable way that you didn't even know. So that's what I love about the job. I think what I loathe about it is that, you know, your most expensive commodity is time, and there's never enough time. There's never enough time to do all the things you want to do, all the initiatives and the meetings and the calls, and you can have your staff do stuff, and you can partner and delegate, but there's never enough time to do all the things that need to be done. And sometimes, when you wake up and you figure out all the things that are needed and the limited amount of time that you have, that can be somewhat paralyzing. But you get up every day, and I use the sports metaphor that when the whistle blows, at least you put in what you could, and when the game ball gets tipped or the kickoff goes off, you do all that you can with the time that you have. But not having enough time is a challenge, because it is a limited resource, and you wish you could do more, but you can't. So you do the best you can with the time that you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I love sort of the two major things that legislators do. I love constituent service, because I'm making that personal connection and being able to use my position to help people, to help them access sort of the levers of power, if you will, to make a call if I need to, or send an email directly to the superintendent of schools, or to some other, very knowledgeable, maybe not even necessarily high level government official who can get them an answer, especially if they've had a lot of runaround. But I also love the policy. I can get really into the weeds of policy in a way that sometimes I think I probably shouldn't have been a legislator, because I really like the details. I think that's, kind of maybe the former journalist in me. I try to get at, really get a real understanding of an issue, especially my bills. The probably biggest frustration is people that will not commit and that sit on the fence, that stay on the fence on an issue when you're counting votes, every vote. This happened to me more often on the county council when there were only 9 members. I'm one of 141 members in the Maryland House of Delegates, but on the council, 1 or 2 people make a huge difference. And for those 8 years, to have people that were on the fence and you could not get them off, or they didn't want to tell you, I'm still thinking about it. More frustrating than that, and I actually had this happen on a bill this year, is when people tell you they're with you and then they turn around and change their mind. And look, everybody's entitled to do that if they gather more information and more people, they heard maybe from more constituents. They're entitled to that. But to me, if that were me, because I very rarely change my mind politically, but when I do, I would go to the person and give them that courtesy and say, look, I'm not with you anymore. Here's why. People don't tend to do that in politics sometimes. And I'm sure Derek and Robert have had this happen. You are ready to fall out of your chair when someone who told you they were with you votes no. I had people on a bill who were co-sponsors of a highway bill I did this year. They were co-sponsors that voted against it in committee because someone had gotten to them, and it just blows you away. You think, what, are you kidding me? Like, you could at least have come to me and told me why you were going to vote against it, what changed. And that's very frustrating.
Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you.
If I could just jump in on that point. That is very problematic. I come from a very principled background, from both from a religious and fraternity perspective, and I go by the motto, your word is your bond. So I would much rather have someone say, you know what, I know you want me to co-sponsor this bill, or you want me to vote this way. I'm not ready to make a decision. One of my former bosses used to always say, keep your powder dry. I'd rather you not tell me where you are and say I haven't made a decision yet, than say I'm with you. Because once you say you're with me, your word is your currency. And in the political construct, if you tell someone I am X, I'm expecting you to be X, because your word and your bond and your authenticity and your honesty, that is your currency. And if you violate and break that, that means going forward, I can't trust you on issues. And that's going to impact your ability to be an effective legislator or public servant, because people can't trust you. So if you I would much rather someone say, listen, I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm still deliberating. I'm gathering information. Take as much time. To me, that doesn't bother me, because that means that you're still making a decision and I still need to work on you. But if you tell me yay, and then later you're a nay, that is a very big issue. And that just means to me that you're not a trustworthy person.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Sin.
Hi, so we are now at 12:58. Another hour has flown by. I'd like to, first of all, thank our three guests so much for being here. I know you're busy. Councilmember at Large Derek Green, Delegate Mary Lehman, and the Honorable Robert Scott. I happen to be one of Mary's constituents. I see how hard she works. I have no doubt that all of you work that hard, and I want to thank you for being there for us. It is a difficult job. We are in challenging times, and I know, like you said, Derek, time is precious, and you took this hour to be with us. So thank you so much. We appreciate it, and thank you to all of our fearless followers.